Good evening, everyone. My name is Mara Ahmed. I am a documentary filmmaker based here in Rochester. Actually, I like to describe myself as an activist filmmaker because I use the medium of film to illuminate socio-political and cultural issues which are otherwise completely missing from mainstream media. I try to provoke thought by flipping and debunking stereotypes. The idea is to make our common humanity more tangible and more real. My first film came out in 2008. It was called The Muslims I Know. My second film premiered at the Little Theater last year. It's a short documentary called Pakistan One-on-One. I have always received immense support from the Rochester community and from the Little Theater as well. I especially want to thank Derek Reese, who is here today, and all of the people who are here today and who have collaborated with me over the years. I'm so grateful for that. So a very warm welcome to everyone here for an introduction to my third film about the partition of India. As the British left the Indian subcontinent in 1947, their colony, or the jewel in the imperial crown, so to speak, was partitioned into a Muslim majority Pakistan and a Hindu majority India. Partition was a traumatic event of historical proportions. Professor Wazira Zamidar, who teaches at Brown University, calls it the wound within, the mother of many millions of identity crises that seem never to go away. As caravans of people immigrated across randomly drawn borders, 1 million were butchered, and this within the space of a few months only. More than 10 to 12 million people were displaced. John Siddiq has written about his father's journey to Lahore after partition and about the fragmented memories he has of him. I would like to read from 6 Snapshots of Partition, which was published in Granta magazine in October 2010. Faisal carries his wife in his pocket. She is a white handkerchief. Faisal carries his 3 daughters in his other pocket, 3 small stones gathered from the side of the road. Their names are lost to walking. His sons Muhammad and Rafiq flank him. They carry the memories of their sisters and mother in their silence. Faisal closed down his carpet shop 3 months ago. He misses his days bargaining at the counter. No one has told Faisal why India has changed. He is not one of those men who drinks tea and talks politics at night. Every time he meets a dead person, he asks them what his wife's name was. He asks and puts his hands in his pockets. Zoom out, and it looks like the whole of India is walking towards a blue line on a rough map drawn onto a napkin. Muhammad Siddiq, my father, is a young man of 17 years on the road from Jalandhar to Lahore. He will never be a Pakistani. He will always be an immigrant. A series of questions which Faisal cannot answer. The scent of the fields after the rain has stopped for a while. Humidity rising, the earth's redness in the dusk. Walking towards a blue line on a piece of paper. It will be better when we're across the border, Faisal says. They move in color, carrying everything they can, though the eye of the century sees them in black and white as a series of stills in a photographer's portfolio. Partition. Sounds like a thin wall made of simple materials between rooms that can be easily taken down. Take the word in your left hand and feel its weight. It is nothing, a few sheets of paper. The Indian subcontinent had always been a deeply diverse, multi-religious, and multicultural society. The decision to partition was taken by a narrow elite. The British were in a hurry to leave India. Nehru and Jinnah were both ambiguous about the consequences of partition. a democratic decision taken by people living on the ground might have been very different. As Dr. Zamidar says, people learn to live together in ways that governments don't. Because of this profound religious and cultural intermingling, there was a certain measure of mercy even in the midst of an orgy of blood and death, something that sets the partition apart from many other genocides. In a study of partition in which he interviewed 1,500 people, Ashish Nandi explains that what leapt out at him most was that 40% of his interviewees, 40%, called up stories of themselves and others being helped by someone from the other side. There is that part of the story too, he says. That too is South Asia. When I met Indian filmmaker Surbi Diwan at RIT, we soon began to talk about partition. Her family is from Lalpur originally, which is now in Pakistan, and they immigrated to New Delhi in 1947. My mother's family is from Gurgaon, near New Delhi, and they moved to Sialkot after the partition. We had both grown up with the same stories, with the same legacy. That'd be great, actually.
Oh, we got tape. Nice.
So we had grown up with the same stories and the same legacy of partition, and we felt like we were meant to make a film together. So we wanted to make a film not so much about the history of the partition or about its legitimacy or illegitimacy, but about the personal stories of partition. Not only did we want to record them, because a lot of the people who lived through the partition are now getting very old, and we feel that it's history that needs to be recorded, but we also wanted to hearken back to a time when Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs and Christians lived together and were able to coexist. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. There was conflict, but they were still able to coexist. And we wanted to look back at that time and see if maybe we could learn something from that, something about how to get along in the future. So for me, when we decided to make this film, I knew that my mother's story would really form the core of the documentary. My mother has very vivid memories of partition, even though she was only 5 years old at that time. And instead of being bitter or angry, she is actually very naturally drawn to people from India. She feels a very special kind of closeness to them. And I think that perhaps it's a need for her to reconnect with something that was lost. I wanted to explore my mother's nostalgia for a lost homeland and a lost time. I could connect to it because I grew up in Brussels, and we moved back to Pakistan when I was a teenager. I did not return to Belgium for another 20 years. But in the meantime, I had this recurring dream. It would recur over and over again, where I would be back in our old neighborhood. We used to live in an apartment, and I would be back in that neighborhood, and I would be looking for our apartment. And sometimes it seemed like everything was in its place and that I would be able to find our home, but I was never successful in doing that. So I asked Gayane Bagdasarian, who is an incredibly talented animator based in Russia and an RIT graduate. She's also a very important collaborator on this film. I asked her to bring that recurring dream to life through animation. And that might actually be the opening of the film, and I would like to share that with you. Here it is for the first time. It will be followed by some clips from interviews that we've recorded for the film. Some of them were taped in New Delhi, and some others were taped in Lahore. So I hope that you'll enjoy.